Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the session. My name is Natalia. I'm a consultant at Custom Clay. I've been with the team for 6 months now, and previously I worked as a campaign lead at the Foreign Office, but that feels actually like a very long time ago already. And so today I'll be doing the session on how to create reach with your content, and I'm just going to quickly let you know what the session is about. So I will guide you through on how to boost your channel performance and through 3 important points. This includes strategic planning, production, and distribution. And I will also provide you with a set of tips and approaches of how you can actually increase your organic reach. I have 6 pieces of advice, and that's the amount that I was able to fit in the time limit we've got. There is, of course, more, but I think that's a good starting point. But if you have any other questions generally about the content reach, content production, please do put them in the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer them with the team later on. Okay, so before we begin to actually saying how, I want to just spend a little bit of time and talk about organic and the difference between organic and paid content. So obviously, organic content is everything you do on social media, everything you do for free. Paid content is essentially advertising. If you are unsure which one serves what purpose, I think it's useful sort of to refer to this table on the screen. But also do keep in mind that things are interchangeable, and it's also not the holistic table, so there are bits and pieces. So organic content is there for you to tell your brand story and build relationship with the audience, and essentially to create a community and manage your reputation of your organization or your policy, think tank, or research institution. Paid content, paid social media, it's a very effective way to break through algorithms and reach new audiences. So you can reinforce your messages like that, and you can promote your campaigns and also use it for more specific needs. For example, generating leads to your and visits to your website, or event signups, or newsletter subscription. A key to a successful channel actually lies somewhere in between those two, and like understanding how to balance them out. I will be talking, as I mentioned, more about the organic reach today, on how you can make your everyday content more noticeable without any budget. But if you'd like to learn more about the financial part of it, please do join Aidan's session on 13th of October. Okay, so what is reach? Reach is essentially a matrix that shows you how many people came across your content. And there are quite a few nuances of how this is calculated for different social media, and actually what is considered coming across, like how engaged people with your content are. But essentially, it's a matrix that shows you the spread, that measures the spread of the conversation on social media. It is generated in different ways, and I've included a few of them on the screen here as icons, and I'll elaborate on them. Basically, first is the number of followers you have. The more people you have, more people have a chance to see your content. Then how many people outside your ordinary followers can come across it using hashtags or using Google search. Obviously, sharing is one of the main drivers for wider reach, but equally how many people engage with your content. The more people comment, the more people like, the more people react to it, the higher ranking your post receives. So I guess the main point that I wanted to make with this slide is that you should think about reach only in the context of other engagement metrics. But how do you bring up to speed those engagement metrics and get more shares and likes? And that's where we move to those 6 pieces of advice. Rule number 1, know your channels. It's quite common for policy organizations to have a variety of social media channels, but it is less common for them to have separate strategies. But if you want your organic content to perform well, you do need to put some thinking behind it. So step number 1 would be content and channel strategy. And I wanted to reuse this slide. I stole it from Tom's presentation a few weeks ago. If you recognize it, do put it in the chat. It'll be interesting to know if you attended the strategy webinar before. If not, basically this Russian doll illustrates how we at Custom Clay approach communications and strategy. I'm not going to go through each of them, but I just wanted to reuse it to show where content and channel strategy sits. And as you can see, it's quite an essential, important block to ensure that your communication strategy, number 3, and then your messaging strategy, number 5, they do have an actionable plan on how you're going to reach your content, to reach your audiences, and how you, what kind of content you should use to convey those messages. A few things to consider in terms of why this strategy matters and why you want to spend time and energy into creating one. First of all, it helps you to understand your audience, to understand their expectations and their behavior, which means that you can adjust your actions to it. Secondly, it provides you with a framework for content production. So you don't always need to create something new. You have this guide and documents and you just follow it as you go along. And also, it allows you to think long-term and set formats and develop content series, which often actually saves resources. And also, if you have a turnaround of content managers, having one strategy document will help you keep your channel consistent, and also help you build trust in your audience to basically make sure that your brand is consistent. So it supports your brand strategy and helps you to create your unique brand voice. And one last point that I want to make here, that it can be actually quite useful also to keep up with social media trends. So if that was convincing and you do want to spend some time drafting and content channel strategy, a few things you might want to consider. First one, obviously audience. And the more you can learn here, the better. This includes demographics, geography, interests, behavior patterns. There is a lot of research available for different parts of the world about content use, and that you shouldn't really experience any information shortage here. But equally, if you already have a channel, it might be a good idea to run an audit and see who's actually following you, who those people, and how do they react to certain content. Equally, make sure you understand the algorithms and how a certain particular social media works. And keep in mind that this one has to be sort of an ongoing process because things change all the time. Features and tools, so you should know everything that's in your arsenal. Analytics, that will help you set and track your KPIs. I also included languages here just to emphasize if you're working in different countries, I think that's from my experience working in foreign office, actually you need to ask yourself whether English language content allows you to reach the audience that you're trying to speak to, or whether you need to find the resources to actually speak their language. And visual aesthetics, beautifully illustrated here by Simpson, is how your content should look to achieve the desired outcomes. Advice number 2, experiment with formats. And as you probably know, that changing modes and changing gears and using videos, using photos, using text is always a good recipe to keep the attention of the audience. And thankfully, there is a large variety of formats available for you to do so. So this table shows how we usually approach social media formats, but it also illustrates the variety available there to use. First of all, obviously, if it's native content, if it's something you will be producing yourself, or if it's an external piece of content that you'll be reposting or reusing from your partners. Secondly, you need to establish timeframes and ask yourself whether it's timely content and it will lose its relevance after a certain period of time, or it's an evergreen piece and it will remain relevant, and I wouldn't say forever, but until your objective change, for example. Quite often, this time frame is defined by an occasion or an event or a hook that you can link your content to. For example, I don't know, most recent examples, UNFSS, COP26, and Human Rights Day. And basically, when people will be talking about those issues, when this conversation will be happening, you obviously want to make sure that you have some content ready for it. But after that, everything that happens after really depends on your knowledge of the social media, but also on your own creativity. And as you can see, each platform offers a wide variety of different formats. And this is only just on the top of my head. This includes stories, events, lives, reels, everything until the augmented reality, really. And this goes on top of content types that you can produce yourself. which includes Q&As, quizzes, takeovers, compilations, interviews, Ask Me Anything, or even following some social media trends like Throwback Thursday. That's just one example I included here. So the amount of variations that can be produced is actually quite large, and I would recommend testing some of them out. And here is a reason why. Basically, it can give your content or your research a longer life. So let's just take an example that you produced a research, a publication or a report, and you want to post it on social media with a link to your website. But instead, try to have a think how you can divide this content into into several posts, highlighting maybe different angles or different issues, and basically making sure that your research gets the attention that it deserves. This could be running an interview with the authors or asking them to record a short video. It could be a Q&A session about your latest research. If you have a team that is able to support a live Q&A session, it could be actually quite a fun exercise for your organization internally. Quote cards, always a good way to keep up the conversation and make sure that your research stays live. Or a quiz. You can also test your audience knowledge about the issue and maybe challenge them on some things. And as you can see, I included quite a few interactive elements, and that's the reason why, because interactive content gains 2 times more engagement than static posts. So you might want to test some of them out. Obviously, don't make all your content interactive, it takes energy, but here and there would be a good addition to your content strategy. One quick tip here is don't link, create native, and then this means, for example, instead of posting a YouTube video, don't use YouTube link, but upload your content directly to Facebook. Your post will always perform better if it's a natively produced post. Essentially, just social media doesn't want you to leave their website anywhere else. And again, coming back to the example with a linked article to research, I know that that's quite a beloved format for many organizations, but you just be aware that Facebook analyzes links based on the quality of the lead, and they prioritize it in people's feeds accordingly. And this not always happens in your favor. So coming back to the example of using different formats and spreading out your research, Always tell the story. We always encourage policy organizations and researchers apply storytelling approach to their communications. I won't be going into too much detail in here, but we'll share a link in the chat if you're interested to read more. Or equally watch the space. We do often run presentations on storytelling. But I just wanted to quickly mention how you can make storytelling part of your everyday content. And the answer is actually fairly simple. So what happens usually is that we have a fact or we have an issue, and then we're trying to connect it to the reader through a piece of content. But this way, you usually leave quite a few things to chance. For example, is the reader aware about the situation? Are they familiar with it? Is it a good time for them to engage with it? Do they have this time? So to shortcut this and also make your piece of content a little bit more impactful, we're suggesting this, essentially remembering that behind every fact and every issue, there is a real person whose life, one way or another, is affected by it. And secondly, don't forget that on the other side of your social media post, there is another person who will read about it. So the goal of your content piece is to build this emotional connection between those two people and tell a story in a way that will bring those people together. So try to make this issue relatable and familiar for someone in a different context. This is a very recent example in my head, and that's why I wanted to use it. We have recently conducted a series of interviews to test some messages for International Livestock Research Institute. And we presented interviewees with a fact-based infographic on the left, and that's infographic about global meat consumption, and then showed a quote from a livestock farmer in Kenya. I'm not going to go into whole what we discovered during this research, but I just wanted to note one curious thing that I found out for myself, is that when people see the quote, their reaction is much faster. So people react much faster and also usually a bit more positive, with a positive sentiment, rather than to the infographic. So with the infographic, they take time to read it, they take time to consider it, and then they actually start disassembling it and raising more questions, more provocative questions like, oh, why didn't you include Australia? Things like that. So with the human content, people connect emotionally, and even before they process the message, even before they process the issue, they already have this positive response. Just a quick side note here, I'm not telling that using quote is the only way to do human messaging. It could be an impactful way to deliver your message. So you might want to consider a similar approach. And this leads me to my next point. It's okay to be human, meaning that social media is predetermined by technology. Algorithms decide what we need, what news we see. AI analyzes our faces. Bots reply to our messages. So you do actually need to make an effort to stand out, as a person in this tech crowd. And I also feel that quite often the pursuit of the label, the non-partisan label, or aka independent, neutral, and objective, unbiased label by many policy organizations or think tankers, it takes a heavy toll on their communications. And I often see quite detached, very distant, very faceless. I hope not offending anyone with that, social media posts, but basically they're trying to be as neutral as possible. While I think during pandemic, there was quite a big change in communications because people started to appreciate human contact more, and many brands changed their approach to communications as well. And it's quite an effective way if you want to get more followers and if you also want to increase your engagement with your content. And the good thing that you don't really need to compromise your seriousness to humanize your brand. There are different ways you can do it. Obviously, not all of them might be suitable for your situation. For example, start thinking about your brand personality or how you can convey it through your images, through your visuals. It's a usual brand 101 exercise. If our organization was a person, how this person would behave. And don't be afraid to engage with your audience. Respond to their messages, maybe not to all of the messages, but equally it's quite good to have a guidance on how do you respond to people on social media. Again, coming back to the posts with more comments, they do get wider reach. Again, tell good stories. It always works. Don't be afraid to acknowledge issues or mistakes. When we talk about humanizing your brand, this includes all human qualities. And I think when brands do recognize some of the issues that they faced, I think that's a very customer-facing example, but it might be applicable to policy organizations as well. And don't forget that organizations, they are made of people, and tapping into those networks, they can help you increase your reach. So make your staff your brand ambassadors. And when you get your team involved into distributing your content, you don't only increase your reach, but you do make your brand stronger and more accessible. Equally, show not only what you're doing, but show how you do it. Go behind the scenes, share some in-moment content, and if the occasion allows, you can also share something positive or something humorous. It always does get a good response. Just a quick note here. I sometimes think that social media managers get, that's talking from my own experience, they do get too engaged in one piece of content, meaning that we do tend to get upset when this piece of content in which we invested a lot of time and energy doesn't receive the attention it deserves. My advice here is don't think too much about individual posts. Think about your brand, think about your campaign and what you're trying to achieve as an organization, and evaluate your efforts based on that and how you propose to perform all together. this leads me to my next point. Reduce, reuse, recycle, always a good strategy, almost a mantra for 2021 and probably upcoming years. How is it applicable to content? Reduce and keep it short and don't try to say everything at once. And I think it's important to remember that communications now is about trying to grab those micro moments of attention from people and finding the perfect time to make the biggest impact. So remember about that and keep your communications quite short and easy for people to engage with. Reuse. If your content of a specific format performed well, why not to use it again? And equally, if you produced an expensive and beautiful video that didn't get enough likes or shares, and don't archive it straight away. Don't get disappointed. Maybe just reschedule it for later in a few months' time, and come back to it and give people a chance to see it. Recycle and create libraries and archives that will allow you to source quotes and useful materials. Again, same example with a beautiful video. If it didn't work, try disassembling it and create different pieces of content, like an Instagram story or a set of quotes or a GIF. The beauty of the evergreen content is that it doesn't always have to be something new. And here's my last piece of advice: engage with partners and leverage your stakeholders. It always the best and most effective way to increase your reach, just to make sure that people share your content. There are different ways that ways that this collaboration can go, and starting from co-running campaigns, doing events together, contests, or celebrating occasions, to actually thinking about partners and stakeholders when you plan your campaign or your content. And essentially, either producing toolkits for people to use or just telling people about your plan. And the key here is actually to make it as simple for people as possible to engage with. So give them notice, share the links once they're published, so that essentially all they need to do is click and share. And also work with influencers, work with people who have access to the audience that you need. It could be political or non-political influencers. Reach out to them and just check if they would be interested to collaborate. You might be actually surprised to discover that a lot of them would be interested. And here's a great example from OECD Greece. They asked a number of bloggers to share their opinion about corruption. And you can see from the numbers on the screen that the campaign, the result of the campaign was very impressive. So here are 6 pieces of advice that I wanted to share with you today. I think it's a very good starting point to increase the organic reach. And what I want to emphasize here is that you really need to find the balance between spending time and resources on planning and actually producing the content and then distributing as well. So you need to have a plan for both of 3 stages and make sure that you don't, overdo one and not do enough on distributing or planning the content. I will stop here, but if you'd like to have a conversation about it or you have any further thoughts, do get in touch. My email is on the screen.